Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're reading Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. Actually, we're going to catch verse 15 because for some reason I missed it yesterday. So let us pick up on our reading. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Right there is an example we should follow. That would be essentially the first command, right? The first direction that God gave Adam and Eve. That would be even the direction that God gave Adam and Eve before he ever gave the command to not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so that would be an example for us to follow, to keep, to work the area that God has put us in charge of. And you have things that you are in charge of. You have areas that you are responsible for, whether that's your house, that's your room, that is your apartment, your workspace. There are so many things outside your house, garden, land. There's so many things that you are in charge of, and you are to dedicate yourself to working it and keeping it. And I tell you, I myself am trying to do that better and to really try to balance too, working and keeping all of the areas of my life. I don't know about you, but what happens to me is that oftentimes it can become a whack-a-mole situation where I'm focusing on this space and this responsibility. Maybe that's going okay. Maybe that's even exceeding. But then oftentimes that is to neglect of another space and another responsibility that God has given me to do. And so we need to be wise in taking care of all of the areas and spaces that we have. You've got to be taking care of your work. You've got to be taking care of your employment. You've got to be taking care of your home, your house, the food you eat, taking care of your body, the relationships that you have with your wife or your husband, with your children, with your mother, with your aunts and uncles, grandpas, with your neighbors, with all of these various people in your life. You need to be keeping up with those. You need to be taking care of even your recreational life. What do you do to relax, to unwind? Work it and keep it. You have various areas of your life that you need to be tending. It's a good example for us to follow, and that would have been the first direction that the humans would have had. Adam and Eve, there it is. Now we're going to see the second command, right? And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden." Now what's interesting, here, it just came to me here. I should have thought about it a little bit more before I pushed record. But actually, the command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the third direction. What's the first command? You may surely eat of every tree of the garden. It's a positive command. Hey, I've made for you all kinds of yummy, tasty trees there. You can eat from all of them. All of them are there for you to eat. A positive command, a good command. And I think it would be wise for us to think about the rules and the principles that God has given us, to think of the things that we are allowed to do and the things that we are encouraged to do. So many times we look at the things that we're not allowed to do and we say that's not fair, rather than saying, oh, look at the great things we can do. Look at the great things we can enjoy. So there's the first command. You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. Things you should not do. Now what's interesting about this tree of the knowledge of good and evil is that Adam and Eve would have already known what is good. They would have seen all of the creation that God made, and they would have saw that it was good. They would not know what it is like to disobey God. They would not know what bad is until they partook of the tree, until they disobey what God told them to do. And then they would even experientially know, oh, this is what it's like to disobey God. And so God says, you shall not eat. And so what are the commands that we are not to do? I always think the greatest way to sum them up is, one, the way that Jesus summed them up. He said, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. Do that. And then love your neighbor as yourself. That would be the second great commandment. Those two are equally important that we should be doing. And I always find those anchored in the Ten Commandments. If you're looking for some examples of what it means to love God and love your neighbor, you look at the Ten Commandments. They definitely break down in that way. So I encourage you, if you're wondering, okay, what is it I should be doing? What is it that I should be paying attention to? Think of the first two great commandments that Jesus gave us. Then also think about the 10 commandments that God gave Moses and the Israelites. I do want to make a note here. Eve has not been created yet. That's going to come in just a minute, or in a couple readings. So this direction is actually given to Adam. And then I think by implication, once Eve is created, either God told Adam and Eve, or Adam told Eve what God had said. Either way, Eve does get commanded these same things as well, but the command actually comes to Adam before Eve is ever created. And then we'll finish up our verse here. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. There's a promise there to claim. It's a negative promise. It's a bad promise, but it's a promise we should claim nonetheless. Whenever we go against God's will, whenever we go against God's way, there is disease, there's trouble that is surely to come. God says you shall surely die. And I honestly believe at the very moment that Adam and Eve ate of that fruit, their bodies began to die. Yes, it took hundreds upon hundreds of years for them to pass away and to die. But that process of decay, the process of death, of wearing down, began at the very moment they ate of that fruit. And, of course, they were actually severed from a good spiritual relationship with God. Pray that has been a blessing to you all, and I'll see you in the next video.